going to call the meeting to order. If someone doesn't know. Okay. Roll call. This is a joint meeting of Budget and Finance Subcommittee and Buildings and Grounds Subcommittee. And I'm going to call the meeting to order. We're going to have roll call. John Ports. I am present. Lindsay Moscow is present. Okay. And then that is Budget and Finance, Buildings and Grounds. I'm going to defer to the chair.
Present is Eileen.
Yes.
Yeah. Myself.
Okay, wonderful. And now I'm going to turn it over to the superintendent for the FY19 final budget considerations and transfers.
Excellent, thank you very much. So at this point in time, we certainly wanted to work with the subcommittees to discuss and move forward some of the projects that we're considering as of the end of the fiscal year. We have, throughout the course of the year, spent our budget according to what was necessary and appropriate, and at this point in time, we do have some surplus funds that we are looking to move forward and work through the capital improvement plan. And so today, we just wanted to provide you with just a general overview of how it is that we ended up with a little bit of a surplus, as well as that which we've already spent in terms of taking care of what needed to be taken care of within the schools, and then looking for guidance from you as well about moving through some of the capital improvement plan projects that we had for FY20, and an additional what we consider to be in the line of school renovation maintenance that I think will help us move forward with just taking care of our buildings. So I'm going to hand it over to Heidi Perkins, the Director of Finance and Operations, who has a deeper dive into where we're at the end of FY19, and then we'll open it up for discussion and questions that you might have for us.
Thank you. In your packet, which was just hot off the presses, we've had everything that's still fluid, closing out the end of the year. You'll see that there is an available balance as of today showing at $38,122 since we put in some additional requisitions, and we'll talk about those in a minute. It will be fully expended. We still have some PD workshops to pay for and things like that, so we still have unencumbered items coming in, and then we'll adjust, as we mentioned before with your prior vote, the prepaid tuition to exactly whatever falls out at the end. But that gives you, we collapsed rather than each school, because at this point we're at the end of the year, so you'll see it's a one page, and that shows you what was as of today, where we are under and over on each of the lines. From there, that ties into the cost center transfer sheet, so we'll go to that first, which was amended since the last meeting for anything that has changed. Although, a lot of that, we don't have a set amount where we say if it's at a certain point, we'll do a transfer. So I did include them all by the cost center, and transfers in, transfers out. You'll see that ties to the, we have a dollar rounding, but the $38,123 that shows us the available balance here, where we anticipate those to be. Again, there might be slight changes as things close out, but it'll be in the minor dollars at that point. So if this, maybe I should stop right there if there's any questions about these pages first, or?
And the $38,000 is under the assumption that we approve all these transfers.
Well, the $38,000 is what is left right now on the budget sheet that's not encumbered. It will be encumbered. I just can't say exactly what line it's going to be in yet, because whether it's PD or some more books or whatever, it's going to be somewhere in one of the lines. But it's immaterial at the $38,000 level of exactly the dollars going into or out of a cost center. There's always under and over in each cost center at the end of the year when things close out.
Could you go back and just, because we're catching this on cable as well,
Yeah.
just to kind of give a highlight of the salary savings and the expense savings?
I was going to go to that next. I just didn't know if there was anything specifically right off the bat with the layout or the numbers, or if anybody had a question about how those tie. Nope. So on in the memo, which we had mentioned throughout the year, we had some positions that were unfilled, 3 of the professional staff positions, either because they're very specific, severe and moderate disabilities, severe disabilities, and the teacher, the visually impaired. The TVI teacher, we've had that advertised all year, and it's very difficult to get a candidate. So that we were trying to fill all year, but that was not filled. And the other 2, either similar situation or because the specific student that required that specific specialty may not have been in district or moved out of district at the time. However, all of them are being filled now. So that's a one-time situation. And then, as we mentioned this several times throughout the year, we had some student services positions that were IAs, that because students moved out of district, we didn't need those IAs if they were 1-1s, inclusion or whatever they may be, and so those became vacant positions. There's always some savings due to staff turnover when people retire after the budget has been voted. That might have been high on the grid, on the scale, and then people come in lower on the scale. We have leaves of absence where a teacher might be high on the scale or anywhere on the scale and they might be out for a year. You have a 1-year sub that comes in less. Then we've had several positions, particularly in facilities, that were workers' comp leaves of absence where we have a 40% savings on the salary while workers' comp is paying them. So a lot of things happen that cannot be anticipated throughout the year. And those are the high-level things. We have some tutoring. I mentioned in the memo that our substitute line, we budget pots of money for the substitutes in each of the different disciplines in the schools. We don't know what you'll need ahead of time, and every district is struggling right now to get subs because we have a very robust economy. So we have some savings in the substitute line. So that's sort of the high level of the larger amounts in the salary. And then in the expense line, again, I know I've mentioned it several times, we budget for 65 students. We don't know while we're doing the budget, how many kids will apply, how many students will apply. They have until April. So we budget for 65. This year we had 55, so we had 20 tuitions. And we were able, because some of those students were seniors and drove their own cars, we found out, into September that we really only needed the one bus, so we had some savings. As you'll recall, most of that bus savings was allocated to the first lease payment on the MFSAB, the multi-function student activity bus that was vetted and discussed. So that's some high level. We had prepaid some out-of-district tuition last year, which of course that savings came forward into this year, which is why we're also prepaying at the end of this year. So that wasn't absorbed and spent. It's just a nice amount that we can push forward into next year. Should we have out-of-district costs that exceed, we would not have to go to the stabilization fund that the town has put in place. So, and that is allowed under the law. That was voted by the committee of people at home. That was voted by the committee a month or so back at our meeting. That's sort of the high level of the larger amounts of expenses.
Mention the circuit breaker receipts.
Yeah, and circuit breaker, and I will actually touch on what's happening this year as well. Circuit breaker, the state is conservative when they tell every district, here's the amount you're going to get in the year for reimbursement from the prior year. In the fourth quarter, they release a little bump in the fourth quarter payment to all the districts once they know what they have left at the end of the year. So that was released about a week or so ago. Last year, the state had budgeted a 65% reimbursement after budgeting approximately 72% for a number of years. And it was such an outcry from all the districts, especially the ones that use it in the current year that they received it, because they hadn't anticipated that sudden revenue loss within the year, that the governor and the legislature passed an appropriation last April to put more money into the state budget. They bumped it up. So Watertown received an additional approximately $200,000 last year. That's not budgeted, so that was an additional offset, and we have 1 year to use it. So we did use that $200,000 this year because we're required to. Just for comparison, it was released the other day that our fourth quarter bump that's not budgeted in our FY20 budget is $69,000 and change. So that's a bumper that'll be next year, and that's always the case year to year. You just don't know how much that fourth quarter payment will be, or if there is one. I've seen it as low as $17,000. So you just never know what you're going to get. But so that also gave us another $200,000 towards our out of district this year, which all feeds into the prepayment for next year. So that's the high level, the larger pots of money where we had some savings this year. And again, the unfilled positions that, and the next year we have 66 or 67 students attending Minuteman. So we will meet or exceed what's in our budget. We won't have those savings next year. And because we have those extra students, we probably won't have the savings with the second bus. We also have one student going to the Aggie, I believe, still right now that wasn't budgeted. So it's very fluid, and we don't know, but the number of things that came together this year would probably not repeat themselves in this way. So I just wanted to point that out for the public as well. And you can't know them at the time that you're budgeting. So that's what occurred to create savings. Here we are at the end of the year. So We had a large number of facilities projects that came up throughout the year that could not be anticipated. Reminding everyone that when we do the budget, it's 18 months ago from where we are today, and we can't possibly know what's going to happen in 18 months. So just for instance, a week or two ago, while they're doing the renovations of the locker rooms, they came across a pipe that nobody knew was there, and we need another $15,000 to move the pipe. That was an emergency email, yes, go ahead. Like, you have to move the pipe, yes, we'll allocate the money. So, and if you have further questions, Lori can speak to that. It was a significant list of asbestos abatement, and then that requires replacing the floors, repairs to the cupola, many boiler repairs, water heater replacement, air conditioning repairs. And again, Lori would know the big long list.
Yeah.
That just for the larger projects was about $385,000, $355,000, I'm sorry, along with all of the other smaller ones that we didn't put into just this figure. Those were unanticipated. They have to be dealt with immediately, whether it's for safety or just to put things back together and not have leaks. We actually recently had a leak in our telephone room, I think it was. So things happen every day. Sewer backups that occurred this year, all sorts of things that had to be addressed. And additionally, with although the testing has always been done, asbestos, water, lead and copper in the water, and all those things that are required, Lori also ramped up the frequency of the testing this year based on either public request or committee request, or just to really saturate and get all the testing really done and redone as we replace some pipes and different things. So that added expense. Putting that all together for the public's sake, even if in the normal budget where there may have been some turn back in years past of here's your budgeted amount, if that level of testing and addressing things and testing batteries and alarm systems and all of those things that have occurred through the year, with increasing that, we will always use more of the allotted budget for the regular everyday testing and maintenance and things, leaving less for these unforeseen emergencies that come up. So those some of the things that happened this year, which then put the facilities budget in a deficit by this much amount just off the start, the 355 plus all the smaller projects that were above and beyond what was in the budget. And we knew from looking at the budget that with these other savings that we were aware of about mid-year that we would be able to cover those without having to go back to the town or any other situation to cover them. As a reminder, we also turned back $400,000 to the town from our utility budget lines for the required escrow payment, so that was already encumbered as well, as we mentioned earlier. So those are the significant high-level things that happen in Lori's world, along with a lot of everyday things that every 5 minutes, I think, she has something that has to be addressed. So through that process and doing the things that we absolutely had to cover with facilities, which took up a large chunk of the savings we had identified, we then, with the school committee's direction, looked at what the staff had requested to really have what they need for curriculum materials, supplies, technology, to service in a way that they feel is appropriate for the education of the students. And many of those items were identified through the budget process when we had some priorities that we were able to fund, unfund, not fund, et cetera, sorry. And so at this point, we completed the elementary school technology requests, as mentioned in the last memo. Curriculum materials for all the schools for whatever they've requested to date. The equipment and uniforms that were requested by our new athletic director as he took full stock. And as a reminder, for the public as well, that additional teams were added this year, so we did not have enough uniforms from the get-go, and other equipment that he needed for the additional teams. Some musical instrument requests, and lighting and soundboards, and LED stage lighting fixtures, which will reduce energy costs by 75%. Additionally, they will be able to change the color with a remote, which also means less people getting up on ladders, which was another plus to that. And some social emotional learning materials that were requested. So that's, again, high level. So once those items were addressed, then we had some facility projects that are on the capital improvement plan that we looked at, and some of those are underway. Lori has a very short window when there's nobody in some of the schools, when school gets out to when the camp, closet, and different things start up. So some of those are being addressed now, and there are a few others that she had recommended that are already spoken for when you're looking at this available budget. They're already in there. So the ones that, I didn't have that funny. Some of them, and Tom might be available to speak to this too, the way that some of these work with the borrowing for the CIP projects is that Lori needs to have the design work done by an architect, engineer, whatever, before she can get a cost estimate. Once she gets the cost estimate, that can be given to the town to then borrow if it's a borrowing project. The catch-22 is that she needs the money from the borrowing to be able to have the design work done, and we can't do that until the design work is done and we have a cost to go out to borrow. So splitting that up and looking at some of the design work that can be done in advance this year with end-of-the-year funds, she would go ahead and get the design work done so that when the CIP money becomes available a year from now, on July 1st, we're ready to actually do the work. And given that our schools are only available really for some of these large projects during the summer months, it's really crucial for their department to be able to start right out on July 1. And so that's some of the thinking behind that. So we talked about the fire protection system, the boiler replacement, and the locker room renovation to get that design work completed. And lastly, which is not on the CIP, to have some asbestos abatement and then the required flooring replacement after the abatement is completed at the middle school. So we have, John talked to Tom last night, and Mark Sedaris has weighed in, and it seems that that is doable if the committee decides to approve that. So the budget report, coming full circle, includes as if all of that work were approved. Much of it, like I said, is underway, and you also have a list of what would come off the town's CIP potentially, which is pretty significant. And if the projects that are a borrowing come off, then the town just obviously doesn't have to borrow, and they would save some interest on that, on the note. And if it was town funded, then we might be able to look at things that are additional projects the next year and move them forward. So, and that's been always the practice of the town. So if there are any questions?
Questions was very thorough.
Very. I agree. Maybe more than you ever wanted to know.
No, it's so good. It's so helpful.
Hey, what we talked about in terms of the addition of the middle school, so that's not listed on here, is it?
On which thing?
No, because these are items.
No, because those were not,
Right.
that's not on the CIP.
Right.
So this is just what would come off the CIP.
Right.
But for the asbestos abatement and flooring, that's not on this list, because this is only CIP projects that
Right.
would come off.
So that's the only
an
one that's
addition.
not, we talked about yesterday, it's not
Yep.
currently on the CIP, but
It's reflected in
Yes.
your
Okay.
budget.
There's
In the
already POs
facilities.
in, so this 38,000, which will be the last cleanups of the last payroll that we have to do, and some POs, of course, will close. Like I said, for 5,000, we pay 4,800, and we close out 200. So there's gonna be a little bit of money that goes in, and then there's gonna be a little bit of money that comes out that's just not encumbered, or last minute things that happens in the close of every budget for
so
everybody.
what did you end up estimating that additional project at?
I used, so to be completely transparent, we have not put out the bid yet, so we don't have an actual, I know you know that, but to anybody else that's watching. So based on a best estimate that Lori could provide based on past similar projects, it was 403, but it's in two different
Right.
POs. It would be two different contracts. One would be the flooring contractor, and one would be the abatement contractor.
So, yeah, can I ask a question on that too?
Yeah.
So I just clarify, everything that's been listed up until the asbestos abatement are projects that have been discussed, vetted, voted forward by the school committee and or the town because it's part of the SIP. The only one that hasn't been is the asbestos abatement and flooring replaced at the middle school. This is not a public safety concern.
Right.
I just want to note that. But we do take this issue really seriously, and we've had a lot of experience with it. And so I do, even though it wasn't on the SIP prior to, I do feel strongly that it's an important thing to address as soon as possible, even though it is not a public safety concern or a concern for students and teachers. But I think we're well served if we deal with it earlier rather than later.
And I just want to make sure people are aware that since this is something that, is recent in the sense of putting this forward, we're not doing the work over the summer. It's going to take time to figure out the best plan to get that done, but at least it is something that we'll be able to tackle if everything goes according to plan, which we anticipate it will, but it's not something that we're going to do this summer, because as we just said, it's not an immediate need. Right now, the tiles are all in place, but as we discovered this year, that could change at any point in time. But at least let's be proactive and get that done and focus our attention in the middle school, because that's our building that we're going to be with for quite some time, so
Great.
makes sense.
Okay. Thank you.
When could that, I mean, it's a fairly large project, so when would that be done? I mean, Christmas vacation, holiday vacations, or?
So I think it all depends on how we approach it, and I think we have to decide what that is. I mean, if we broke it up into chunks, we could probably start at Christmas, but that might be 2 years, and it's very hard because I need about 2 weeks of time.
Right.
And I don't have 2 weeks of time anytime throughout the year.
Right.
Ideally, if it was all up to me, it would be done in the summertime where we could have that, it'd be 2 weeks of time for just one classroom. Now that we got, 7 classrooms, that's gonna be, a month of time that I kind of need. So summer is really the only feasible time to do it all together. Doing it all together makes sense, from a procurement standpoint, from everything else. But those are the types of things that we're gonna have to figure out along the way.
Because Camp Pequawset uses that area, or?
It does right now.
Right.
yes.
It does.
But in the past, when
They-
it's needed,
they
they
could
can
also-
be
Right, they can
moved.
be moved.
They have been moved. They were at the Hosmer.
Yeah, I said they were at the
So,
Hosmer.
Not that the Hosmer is going to be exactly the location of choice next summer, but
They'll have a home.
it will have a home,
Yeah.
meaning, the high school, we'll figure it out. We're gonna have to figure out a lot of our summer programming, not just the middle school projects, because I think and it's not just this project next summer. I think if we focus our attention on, many things that have to happen in the summer, and we're able to liberate the space, then we can move through a lot.
Yes.
So I think that's probably more realistic, is, get some of the work started, obviously, in, next fiscal year, but do the bulk of the work once the summer hits, so.
So you anticipate this project happening the summer of 2020?
That's what I anticipate right now.
Okay. Does anyone have any other questions? Any questions from the audience?
Flooring at the middle school, the other flooring, do we need to discuss that at all?
That's already
And
in here.
It's on there, yeah.
get your votes. We're very excited to be able to move forward.
Okay. Anything else?
I don't know if there's any, what does the B, those are the design?
I just wanted to point out which of these projects the town would have gone out to borrow.
Right.
Oh, I see, borrowing.
So that, over $200,000 of loan orders would not necessarily have to take place then. And again, makes Tom happy, I'm sure, he's smiling. And of course, the savings of not having to pay interest on that debt, so.
Right.
Yeah.
So these are all FY '20 capital improvement, except where they're noted otherwise.
20 to 24.
Yeah,
A
that's
couple
the
of them are.
Yeah, the middle school furniture is 20 to 24,
Right.
and the security cameras were combined over 20 and 21. But again, based on requests from both principals at the middle and high school to see if we could finish the cameras. They've been partially done, but of course, wherever they needed a camera is the place where
Right.
there isn't a camera right now, so.
It's not always the case.
So those, a couple, things came up through the year where they would have liked to have had those
Yes.
in.
Great. It's a nice opportunity to get a head start on some of these things, particularly as you say, the design work, and to be able to do that kind of lines things up in a more, in a manner that can be done more quickly.
Question about the timing for these projects that were removed from the SIP. Do you anticipate them happening this summer? Okay. all of them?
Yeah. Wow.
Yay.
That's exciting.
The only one being the flooring, the second floor
Just-
flooring in the, not for the abatement in the flooring, but the one on the top floor.
Yes.
I anticipate that starting this summer, but I
Okay.
don't know, given the lead time of materials, if I'll be able to do all of the rooms
And
this
those are
summer.
the classrooms to make sure they mirror the hallway.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
Yes.
Remove the floating floor.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, the floating floor.
Yeah.
Is that the 152?
It's so much fun.
Yes,
The 152?
That's true.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be starting this summer and then rolling into vacations.
Yes.
Okay.
If I can get it done this summer, it all depends on the lead time of materials.
Yeah, and how many classrooms are there as part of that? Because that's the second.
I don't remember exactly in the top of my head, I'm thinking 13, but
Okay.
please don't.
Yeah, around there.
Around
Roughly.
13, yeah.
Yeah. And there's no asbestos issue there.
No.
The high school classroom floors, can you, I don't know what that is.
So, the high school classroom floors, there are 4 floors where the tile is starting to, crack. Those do have black mastic under them, and so we are putting tile floor on top to encapsulate it in those floors.
Okay. Are there any other questions before we move on? No. Okay. All right, so we're gonna do 2 votes for the 2 different committees, so I'll do budget and finance first. Is there a motion to recommend to the full school committee the transfers outlined by Ms. Perkins?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Is there a motion from the Buildings and Grounds Subcommittee to accept all of the items listed by?
So.
I'll second my own motion. And we're really,
Aye.
aye.
All right. So, a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
All right.
Thank you very
Once
much.
official, when would I go?
Great.